Jamie asked me to come speak about the 5 ballot measures we will all be asked to decide on in November. It's my guess that you all may be really familiar with 2, maybe 3 of these. So I'm going to kind of give the brief overview of each of them, but I'll stop for questions in between. As Jamie said, my organization is non-partisan, but we have actually taken a position on one ballot measure, that's Prop 306. My trusty assistant, also known as my mom, is handing out my lit, so she's helping me out tonight. But I guess we'll just start kind of what's up first. So Prop 125, does everybody know what Prop 125 is? Oh, ish, a little bit. So Prop 125 was referred to us by the legislature this year. Do you all remember back in 2016 when we voted, we passed Prop 126? That was the changes to our public safety pension system for police and firefighters. What that did in 2016 was it changed the way our pensions for public safety officers are calculated. It changed it from a permanent benefit increase to a cost of living adjustment. Now, that was in 2016. What we're going to do in 2018, or what's being proposed, is that we also rope in elected officials and correctional officers into that same new formula. This was passed out of the legislature with bipartisan, I believe almost unanimous. If it wasn't unanimous, somebody was just absent that day, support. As far as I know, my organization does a lot of money and politics research and a lot of, determining who's spending on these campaigns. We are going to see little to no spending on either side of this campaign. Kind of a very minute issue, although very important. But compared to some of the other things that we're going to see on our ballot, just no attention is being drawn to that. Do folks have questions about Prop 125 at all? No?
125 or 306?
125. I'm going to get to 306 at the very end. I'm going to talk about all of them. Yeah, question.
What's your position on that?
My organization doesn't have a position on it. So my organization only has a position on 306. If you want to talk about my personal position, I'd be happy to do so in the parking lot. But I am wearing the work hat tonight. So I guess I'll move on to Prop 126. Oh, yeah, question. I'm so sorry. 125 is related to pensions for elected officials and correctional officers. So that's how it will appear on your ballot.
What does it do?
Yeah, it changes the way pensions are calculated from that permanent benefit increase to a cost of living adjustment. So essentially it changes the math for how a pension is calculated, that we are already doing so for police and firefighters as well. It just kind of changes those 2 other groups. It's more cost effective for the state. There is, bipartisan support for this kind of change, and essentially it's just changing it moving forward.
So it reduces the pensions?
It doesn't reduce the pension necessarily. It changes how they're calculated. There's not a ton of, monetary changes, I suppose, but it's how it's calculated. It's how, employees will put their money into their pensions and how much the state will match. Yeah, you have a question, Jennifer?
Does this go retroactive, or does this draw a line in the sand and say everybody moving from this point forward gets these changes and everybody who got to this point keeps what they had before?
It will affect currently. It's right where it's at right now. It will affect new hires and current employees in those systems.
And is the argument we think we've been paying these people too much, so we want to diminish their payments in the future? Yes. Or is that really the argument?
I don't know if diminish would be the right word, but yeah, I suppose that's kind of the line that, was touted when it was going through legislation.
That's same for the state. So
Yeah.
for them.
Yes.
Change the rate of growth.
Excuse me?
Change the rate of growth.
Sean here? Sean?
It would cap the rate at 2% instead of 4%. It would not give employees what they had been promised.
Thank you, Jenny.
And it would open the door for the state ledge to look at other pension programs like ASRS. Those are some of the comments about it.
Jenny, can I ask, does the LD have a position on that program?
No, it's your call, because there are a lot of, just like Morgan said, it's a bipartisan support for it.
It was supported pretty much unanimously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Arizona Chamber of Commerce.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I believe we have a supporter, legislative supporter in the House as well. Yeah.
If it was supported so strongly by the legislature, why did they vote by?
Because it would be amending the Arizona Constitution. The pensions are protected in the Arizona Constitution, so it has to get voter approval as well. Yes.
Isn't this negotiated with the unions of the public safety workers?
I believe the unions were a big player in 2016 when this was being passed by the legislature. I believe also the unions for the correctional officers were a huge player and were at the table for most of these, or not all of these conversations when it was going through the legislature as well.
So do they support this?
I believe they do. I don't think they filed an official argument in the publicity pamphlet, but
Jamie says no.
no, they
The
don't.
unions, not all the unions.
Not all of the unions support it. Yeah.
It's a very difficult issue. It's not, I mean, because it does help the municipalities be able to survive. Their sustainability is impacted positively. But the employees and the risk that people see in the future is against it. So you really are on your own in this. It's a very difficult issue, very difficult.
I just looked up something that is supposedly paid for by the Arizona Democrats of Legislative District 18. Not sure how to vote, and they listed up 5 propositions, and Prop 125 was listed as no, Prop 126.
That was our error to come out so early. But the first one is really on your own. There's a lot for it, there's a lot against it.
Okay.
But the other 4, as clear cut as you can be in Oregon election, clear as whatever.
Yeah, and so, I mean, Prop 25 is a very complicated issue for a lot of folks, and folks in this room may fall on very different, sides of that argument. But essentially, zero money is going to be spent on a campaign supporting or opposing this. 1, because it is wildly complicated to talk about to voters, and 2, because, a lot of money is just essentially being sucked up by other ballot measures or other candidates in the state. So it's really important to, make sure you check this out. Yeah, last question about Prop 125?
Yeah, part of the issue is the sustainability of the pension system.
Yep.
If you look at this particular pension system, it's one of the most underfunded pension systems in the state. And so that's part of the consideration. So when you're thinking about how to vote, think about whether or not this is going to have some impact on the sustainability. That's why in 2016, the public safety officers were supportive of it because they wanted to ensure that the system stayed sustainable. So in the future, they would continue to receive pensions.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Thank you. Any other questions on Prop 125? Okay. All right, let's move on to Prop 126, another one that has maybe not gotten a ton of attention, but I believe we have an opposition pack that just filed today or earlier this week.
I see a bunch of signs and ads for it,
Yep, there's...
and I don't trust them.
It's like an evergreen statement. So Prop 126 is being referred to as the Protect Arizona Taxpayers Act. Now what Prop 126 purports to do is it would essentially prohibit any future increases in sales taxes, also known as transaction privilege taxes, across our state. So that includes counties, cities, towns, statewide taxes, you name it. The tax rate you're locked in for now for your sales tax on services would be locked in. You could never increase your sales tax on services. Now, many cities and towns do not currently have a sales tax on services, but we do have a statewide TPT tax, which is a transaction privilege tax. It's kind of just a different name for a sales tax. The way sales tax are figured in Arizona, they're imposed on the seller rather than the buyer, which is different from many other states. So that rate would be locked in right now. No matter if you were a charter city, you could not increase your sales tax on services, even if you passed a charter amendment. This proposition, this ballot measure is written very, very cleverly to make sure that there are essentially few loopholes to get out of that. Now, like I said, many cities and towns do not currently impose this type of sales tax on services, but it would prevent them from ever doing so in case we had a revenue problem in the future. Now, one very interesting thing about this is our Constitution does not officially define services. So it's kind of widely disputed on what services may include. The Joint Legislative Budget Committee has laid out some things that they would consider services, so that could include things like attorney's fees, things like potentially some doctor's visits, potentially veterinarian visits, potentially a tax on a haircut, things like that. Interestingly, this proposition is being primarily funded by the Arizona Realtors Association and the National Realtors Association, and those folks would potentially be subject to such a tax on their service if there ever were to be one in a certain city or town. Those are the folks, that committee that you're seeing all those yard signs, those big kind of like turquoise ones, they're all over my neighborhood, they're all over LD18. Those are paid for by the Protect Arizona's Taxpayer Committee, which is primarily funded by the Arizona Association of Realtors, the National Association of Realtors, and groups of the like. I do believe we have there is a opposition campaign. I saw that on Twitter today. So we'll see how that kind of comes out. But I believe LD18 is taking the position of no on Prop 126. Is that correct, Jamie?
Yes.
Any questions about Prop 126? Yeah, Jen.
Can you talk about how difficult it is to pass a new tax in the state of Arizona already?
I mean, I think we all know how difficult it is.
Why they would even say they needed this in the first place, because it's already exceedingly difficult to pass new taxes.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why this is, a huge preemption of the abilities of cities and towns and counties to pass this kind of, tax increase if they needed to in the future. Like I said, this doesn't already exist in many places, but this is just preventing them from ever doing so. Not quite sure why they would feel like we need this. I mean, Arizona does have a revenue crisis. There's not enough money to go around. That's evident of, the past 6 months that have happened here in Arizona. So not quite sure why.
Yeah, so it already takes 2/3 of each chamber of the legislature and the governor's signature to pass a new tax. It's exceedingly difficult to pass taxes in Arizona. Yeah.
So that's in the state.
Yeah, that's very true. It hasn't happened since that's been the requirement.
That's a
Yeah.
state tax.
Yeah. Yeah, question.
I'm curious as to the backers of this proposition. It doesn't strike me a bunch of realtors would be sitting around saying, hey, we really need to exclude $12 billion of the state economy from future taxation. So it strikes me that they're the patsies or the foils for, more out-of-state, more national elites who might be interested in a way of strangling the state, the future of the state government's revenues.
Very interesting.
I don't know that, but I know that.
I'm gonna start saying that. You bring up a very interesting point, and particularly who is funding this. I mean, we've dug as far deep as we can into the funding of this. I don't believe there's been any independent expenditure money that's been spent on this so far, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if there were in the future. So, any other questions? Yeah.
Since sales taxes are regressive, which is against the principles of the Democratic Party, why are we not why are we not for this?
Well,
Representative Epstein is jumping to.
yeah, Morgan was clear Jennifer, that it takes 2/3 of the state legislature plus the governor's signature. And they have not defined what these services are. And if I can quote Steve Farley, this will protect the rich and harm the poor, guaranteeing ever-increasing sales taxes on life's necessities, while services for middle-class and working families are cut. As in the past, spared will be those who can afford lobbyists to buy their own personal loopholes. And he's a big one on loopholes.
Thank you to my friends who can be more partisan tonight in the room to help me explain that one. Any further questions on 126? Now I know we have some folks from 127 in the room too, so I will talk about that in brief. I am sure you all are familiar with Prop 127 though. That's clean energy for a healthy Arizona. It's mixed up every time I say it. What this would do is it would require all public or privately held utilities to increase their renewable energy production to 50% by the year 2030. There is an inordinate amount of money that has been spent on this campaign. I don't know if anybody has gone on the internet or turned on their TV in the past 60 days, but you've definitely seen an ad for this or opposing this. It is primarily being funded by the pro side is primarily being funded by a group called Next Gen America, which is a group that seeks to promote the use of renewable energies across the United States. It's primarily being opposed by Pinnacle West Capital Corporation, which is the parent company of Arizona Public Service, also known as APS. I believe in aggregate there's been something like $19 million spent on this race already by those two primary funders of this campaign. It was definitely a battle for this thing to stay on the ballot, but it is one of the few ballot measures that did make it through the initiative process and we will be voting on this year. Some of the arguments on the pro side are things like Arizona currently gets 6% of its electricity from renewable resources right now. Some of the arguments on the con side are this mandate will pass, costs down to customers, things like that. But I really don't want to suck up a ton of attention on this. Are there any questions on 127 right now?
Who's going to talk about it tonight?
We have Jason in the back there from Prop 127, just behind you. So he's going to chat about it. We have a clean energy song in here.
My energy, it is so fresh and clean.
Jason, you have some literature to pass out to people, correct?
Yes, I've got boxes of literature here. I'll pass it out. Thank you, Dean.
All right, so while Jason's passing that out, I will probably breeze over the next one as well. That's Prop 305. Has anybody heard of this before? Yeah. So 305, would repeal what the legislature did in 2017, which is the expansion of voucher programs. As you all know, Arizona is ground zero for this, voucher experiment funded by the Koch brothers and Betsy DeVos and people of the like. So thanks to, I'm sure many of you in this room tonight, we will be voting on Prop 305 because advocates for public education said, enough with the legislature, we're going to step in and make sure that we have a check on, our elected officials. Does anybody have any policy-ish questions on 305? I'm sure you all have the ballot language memorized at this point, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it, but awesome. Okay, now we're going to talk about my favorite proposition.
Oh, wait a minute, Morty.
Oh, yes, please.
We have No on 305 shirts, which are wonderful when you're going canvassing or just to the grocery store or getting a haircut. Yes, thank you. See?
Got them in the back.
So we have lots of those shirts, we have buttons, we have car stickers, everything.
These fancy bracelets.
Yes.
Ooh, I didn't know we had bracelets.
We got a whole packet of them outside.
I'm snagging one. All right, so make sure you get your Prop 305 swag. All right, so now I'm going to talk about Prop 306. This is the only ballot measure my organization has taken a position on because it is an attack on Arizona's clean election program, which is near and dear to my organization's heart. My organization started way back when we passed the Clean Elections Act 20 years ago. So once again, we are seeing another attack on this vital program to protect democracy in Arizona. So we are asking you to vote no on Prop 306. Is anybody a little bit familiar with 306? A little bit, all right. So I will kind of give you the crazy story of this. So Prop 306 was referred to you by the legislature It was the final act of the legislature was to pass this bill. This happened at about 12:30 at night. I'm sure Representative Epstein can tell you about how everybody was up for 40 hours at that point. My eyes were just glazed over. Everybody was just deliriously tired when we passed this. This passed with, completely like nonpartisan support. Every single Republican voted for it. Every single Democrat voted against it. And what Prop 306 would do is it would strip the Clean Elections Commission of its independent authority. So if you remember when we passed clean elections in '98, we specifically created this to be nonpartisan and independent of the executive branch. So that way, no matter who was in power, our elections would be watched over by an independent source. This is the only body in our state that is watching our elections and putting a check on campaign finance spending throughout our state. Now, what this would do is it would get rid of that independence. It would say that every single rule that Clean Elections has to pass, Clean Elections passes, those related to how we report campaign finance spending, how dark money is disclosed, how they, do their voter education program must be approved by this body called the Governor's Regulatory Review Council. Now, you all know what that is, right? No, I had no idea what GERC, Governor's Regulatory Review Council, was until like maybe 6 months ago. So the Governor's Regulatory Review Council is a board of, essentially right now they're all political people, they are, every single one of them but one is a current or former lobbyist. So they all sit on this board and they're in charge of reviewing every single agency's rules, how they carry out their business of any state agency. Now, Clean Elections believes that they should be exempt from that review of these partisan people because they were designed to be independent. And now the state is trying to mandate them to fall under that. So essentially, we are handing over control of our nonpartisan Clean Elections Commission to a group of partisan officials appointed by the sitting governor. So that is in essence what Prop 306 does. Prop 306 would also prevent candidates participating in the Clean Elections program from working with their political party. So that would prevent candidates working with from working with their party from, buying things like access to the van, from attending trainings, from, buying lit together, things like that. It would prevent you from using your Clean Elections campaign money from doing that. But my group is primarily focused on Clean Elections being stripped of its independence and being attacked once again by, these dark money lobbyists who just, would prefer that voters are left in the dark when it comes to disclosing things like that. So I have little lit cards. I'm going to leave some here for you all to canvas with next time you're out. But this proposition is wildly complicated and is definitely not getting a ton of, attention statewide. So I really need everybody's help in this room to talk to your neighbors, talk to folks out in the community when you're out canvassing and tell them to vote no on Prop 306 because it is just another power grab by dark money special interest lobbyists. Just like those three really scary words, but it's so true. So, are there any questions on 306? Could I elaborate on anything? Yeah, question, right?
Is this a constitutional amendment also?
It is not, but it would amend the Clean Elections Act, which is voter protected because we passed the Voter Protection Act the same time we passed the Clean Elections Act, which is why we're being asked to vote on it again.
Okay. So
Yeah.
if when we turn the legislature and the governor's office blue, can we pass laws that would, if this passes, can we pass laws to counter this?
No, we would have to go back to the voters again because it would be voter protected if this passes. Yeah, question.
The East Valley Democratic Breakfast Club would like to donate $200 to this campaign.
Oh my gosh.
By way of the Arizona
Thank you. Oh, goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you. Gosh, my whole week is just so made. So, I will guess I will close. Last question. I'm so sorry.
Does this have anything to do with the redistricting of the voter precincts?
This does not particularly, but my organization was on the forefront of that fight as well at the legislature this year.
Repeat the question, please.
She asked if this had to do with the independent redistricting system. This particularly does not. But we know we need, solid clean elections candidates in the legislature to help us protect that next year, and so we need to protect clean elections as well. So, yeah.
Can you talk, some of us here live in Phoenix, can you talk about the ballot prop in Phoenix about dark money?
Of course I can. So thank you to the leadership of Councilmember Lauren Kuby in the back. Vice Mayor now. Oh my gosh, I said that wrong. Wow. Well, since we passed Proposition 403 in the city of Tempe, that would require more elaborate disclosure of campaign finance spending in the city of Tempe. That passed with an overwhelming 91% of the vote. So, yeah, thank you to those voters in Tempe. And because of its success, led by Vice Mayor Kuby in Tempe, Councilmember Kate Gallego in Phoenix decided to kind of run with this idea as well. So essentially the same proposition that was proposed to Tempe and passed by 91% of Tempeans who voted will appear as Proposition 419 on your Phoenix ballot in November as well. My organization was also a part of helping that get on the ballot in the city of Phoenix as well as in Tempe. So definitely make sure you flip your ballot to the other side in November and check out all of the Phoenix propositions, especially Prop 419. So yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. I appreciate it. Yeah.
But that broader one proposition that was supposed to be on with the state got killed.
Yeah, outlaw dirty money, which is essentially what happened in Tempe and what we're hoping will pass in the city of Phoenix was essentially the municipal version of outlaw dirty money. It would require disclosure of expenditures made over $10,000 in city elections. So obviously a little bit of a lower limit for municipal elections just because we don't see as much campaign finance spending, but unfortunately outlaw dirty money did not make it on the ballot because of things like strict compliance of ballot initiatives. So we're definitely hoping to make sure that we see some changes on that front, but because unfortunately it's becoming more and more difficult to pass ballot measures like outlaw dirty money, a lot of the times the only places we can win these fights is in our cities, which is why we're so lucky to have champions of democracy and dark money disclosure like Councilmember Kuby and former Councilmember Gallego in Phoenix. So any other questions I could answer? So I guess the last thing I'll leave you with is everything I just said and more can be found starting tomorrow morning at azballotguide.com. My organization, Arizona Advocacy Network, has partnered with the League of Women Voters, and some of you may recognize the League's ballot guide. We have made it again this year. It is being released tomorrow at azballotguide.com. You can access it all online. There's a printable version. As soon as I get them picked up from the printer tomorrow morning, I will come drop some off in the LD18 office. You can grab them, give them to all your friends, but there are no more questions. If you wanted to fill out that little sheet that was passed out to you earlier, I will get you on our email list. I'll make sure you get that link and more information about Prop 306 as we ramp up our campaign on this. But other than that, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I appreciate all your questions, and I'm sure I'll see you around. So thank you.
Thank you.